I want to talk about Ohio State and Oklahoma and football during pandemics, right? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we got some folks that are choosing to play football. We got some folks that are saying, hey, we can't play football. And I get both arguments here, although I am firmly in the camp of don't play football. But y'all not listening to me. So as long as you're not listening to me, I'm going to be in this ship with you and I'm going to be at the back going, watch out for the iceberg, don't hit it. Till then, let's take a look at what happened last time there was a pandemic that hit the United States, right? Pandemic is a global term. Epidemic is, confined to a space. So pandemic, the entire world. Epidemic, just that small bit of space there. Dust bowl. Epidemic, right? Not a pandemic. Anyway, point is, Ohio State was told to close campus in 1918 on a Friday by public health officials. They played football the very next day with fans in the stands against Denison. So the folks in Columbus are not used to being told they can't play football come hell, high water, or pandemic, right? So them not having football this season is going to be unprecedented. It was a world war going on at that time. They still played football. And that's what happened with Michigan as well, who's not going to play football this year. They too decided to go ahead, and they went 5-0, claimed co-national championships. Pitt goes 4-1, claims co-national championships. But what I found to be the most interesting in my research for this segment is what did the 1918 Oklahoma Sooners football team do? It's the 14th year of Benny Owen, and he had it humming right along because the Sooners played 6 games, the Sooners won 6 games, and went 2-0 in conference competition and outscored their opponents 278-7. October 19th, the opener at Arkansas, right? They beat Arkansas 103-0. Okay, that's the first one. The second one, Central State, which you know now as UCO, beat them 44-0. The next game, Post Field, which I'll get to in a second, they beat Post Field 58-0. Post Field is named for Henry Post Army Field, which was one of 32 air service training camps during World War I and became the first training post for the Air Force post-World War II. So you're fighting against dudes, or I should say you're playing football against dudes who are literally soldiers. They go to war and kill people for a living. And the University of Oklahoma stopped a mud hole in them and walked it dry 58-0. Then you move to Kansas, which actually acquitted itself well with what we know about Kansas football, 33-0 at McCook Field in Lawrence. And then you get to Phillips, where Oklahoma plays a tight one, 13-7. I want to get to Phillips here in just a second. And then, of course, Oklahoma A&M, which you know as Oklahoma State, beat Oklahoma State like you beat Oklahoma State, 27-0. They did not claim a national championship. They did not claim a conference championship. There were no recognized All-Americans, and there were no honors received for being All-Southwest Conference for this OU team. They looked at titles and said, we played half a season. What are we going to claim a title for? What are you talking about? To say nothing of that Phillips team that they played against was without their coach after its second game because their coach, who is a legend in his own right, in John Malbesh, went into the Naval Aviation Program to fight World War. But it gets better than that. That team also had on it Steve Owen, not to be confused with Steve Owen, Heisman Trophy winner, but Steve Owen from Cleo Springs, Oklahoma. And Steve Owen, who is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a player and a coach. Because Steve Owen, coming out of Cleo Springs, ends up at Phillips because he's recruited by John Melbesh, who was an All-American tailback at Michigan, whose nickname was, I kid you not, the Human Bullet. They put together a squad. They're thumping people like you read about. They're thumping people like you know of Oklahoma to do in 2000, like you know Nebraska to do in 95, like you know that USC dynasty to do, like Alabama, Clemson, LSU today. That was Phillips, and it was in Enid, Oklahoma. More to the point, it began as Oklahoma Christian University. And along the way, you get Steve Owen, who earns the nickname Steve Stout. Yeah, not to be confused with, hip-hop producer Steve Stout. New York Knicks brand ambassador Steve Stout. Now, Steve Stout, that we know about, Steve Owen, a little bit Cherokee, all a bit stocky. 5'10", 237 pounds, getting it done. invented the A formation, which you know of as the single wing or T formation to some. Now, also in there, he becomes a New York Giants head coach. NFL titles 27, 34, 38, All-Pro in 27, which means that he was playing and coaching and still managed All-Pro at 5'10", 237 pounds of just stout. That Phillips team was one of the best, not just of that year, but of that period. Because in just a little bit more research, you'll find out that in 1919, that was actually the year in which Phillips was absolutely crushing people. There were stories about Phillips having used ringers to beat up the likes of Texas, who expected to beat Phillips and got beat down by Phillips. We got the University of Texas athletic director Theo Belmont saying, hey, look, I know everybody thinks that they use ringers, but undoubtedly Phillips has the best team on the gridiron in this section. This section being Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, anybody that wanted to come down to the Southwest and get got. Phillips won 10 games in 1919, also allowed just 14 points from opponents while scoring 424, including this game that I feel like Stillwater actually might want to claim a national championship for when you find out that, Oklahoma A&M actually got to a tie of 7-7 in that year. Henry Kendall College, which you know as the University of Tulsa, also was able to get a tie out of that Phillips team. But then Kendall went and beat Oklahoma 27-0, and the Sooners didn't play Phillips that season, and that was an undefeated season, right? So you could also see how they've just been doing this, and we've been doing this in the state of Oklahoma. We play football here, is the point. We love football here, is the point. I understand what it's going to be like for some people if you don't get football or if you don't get as much of a season, but what we have to show from history is probably going to get through 5 or 6 games. After 5 or 6 games, all bets are off. So if you get football, enjoy every moment of it. Build your life around it as you might normally just do it at home, because it is not guaranteed this year at all. And as I tell people, in the University of Oklahoma and in this state, that's who we are. That's our birthright. I've said before, and I will continue to say, to be black in America is to be in a paradox. To be a black Oklahoma fan is also to be in a contradiction. Because while segregation was here, and while we tried to remain racist against folks that were not white, we also had football. When people left this place because a Dust Bowl set in, when people tried to use this place as a hinterland and a wasteland to force people to live and not to care about them, we had football. When I leave the state of Oklahoma, I wear my Oklahoma gear. I don't much care to rep the Thunder. They haven't earned it yet. The pro team is in Norman. The birthright is in Norman. The pride of this state is in Norman. And we have places like Phillips, Stillwater, Tulsa, and all of these smaller towns that had university footballs to thank for that, as much as what Bud built, what Barry sustained, what Bob sustained, and what Lincoln has inherited. Proud to read these stories. I'd be even more proud to know that my state loves me back.